7 miles down, in total blackness, something is alive where nothing should survive. We're talking about the Mariana Trench, the deepest scar on planet Earth, a place darker and more crushing than outer space. Down here, water pressure could flatten a car like a soda can. Yet life exists, glowing creatures, see-through fish, bacteria trapped in rock for millions of years. Today we're diving into a boiling chimney hotter than your oven, a monster earthquake waiting to wake up, and a mystery signal once mistaken for aliens. If strange extreme stories pull you in, hit like and subscribe before we go deeper, because what's waiting at the bottom of the ocean sounds more like science fiction than science. Prepare yourself. We're going down. Picture Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth. Now drop it into the Mariana Trench. It disappears. More than a mile of water still sits above the peak. That's how deep this place goes. The trench sits in the western Pacific Ocean, near the island of Guam. It stretches for 1,500 miles, longer than the distance from New York to Dallas. But length isn't what makes it famous. Depth does. At its deepest point, called Challenger Deep, the trench drops almost 7 miles below the surface. Confirmed measurements put it around 36,000 feet down. For comparison, airplanes cruise at about 35,000 feet, so the deepest part of our ocean sits lower than where a jet flies, just pointed straight down into blackness instead of up into sky. Sunlight gives up long before you get there. It fades out around 3,000 feet, barely a tenth of the way down. Everything past that point exists in permanent night. No sunrise, no sunset, just darkness, forever, for millions of years. The pressure down there builds with every foot you sink. By the time you reach the bottom, it's crushing down at over 16,000 pounds per square inch. Scientists compare it to having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of one single person. Steel submarines groan under that kind of force. Human lungs would collapse instantly without protection. And yet, this crushing, lightless pit isn't empty. Far from it. Creatures live down there. Some scientists believe entire species are still waiting to be found, hidden in trenches even deeper than this one across the globe. But Mariana remains the deepest known point on the planet, the record holder, the bottom of the world. The trench formed through a process called subduction. One giant piece of Earth's crust, the Pacific Plate, slides beneath another piece, the Philippine Plate. Imagine two rugs on a floor, one sliding under the other. That collision, moving at a pace slower than your fingernails grow, carved out this massive crack in the ocean floor over millions of years. For most of human history, this place stayed a total mystery. We had better maps of the moon than we did of our own ocean floor. It took until the 20th century for anyone to even attempt reaching the bottom, and when someone finally did, what they found down there raised more questions than it answered. Because here's the strange part. Something this deep, this dark, this crushing, should be lifeless. No sunlight means no plants. No plants should mean no food chain. By every basic rule taught in a science classroom, Challenger Deep should be an empty, dead pit at the bottom of the sea. It isn't. Something survives down there, something that shouldn't be able to, and the deeper scientists look, the stranger it gets. But first, you need to understand exactly what that water is doing to anything that enters it, because the pressure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench doesn't just push, it transforms. Drop an empty soda can into Challenger Deep and something brutal happens. The water pressure folds it flat within seconds, crumpling solid aluminum like it's made of paper. That's not an exaggeration. That's confirmed footage, filmed by real deep-sea missions. Now imagine that same force acting on a submarine, or a human body. At sea level, air pushes down on you with about 15 pounds per square inch of pressure. Your body doesn't notice it. You've felt that pressure your entire life, so it feels like nothing. But sink down into the ocean, and pressure builds fast. By 1,000 feet, You're already under 30 times the pressure you feel on land. Keep going. By the time you reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench, nearly 7 miles down, the pressure hits over 16,000 pounds per square inch. To picture that, imagine balancing 50 jumbo jets on top of a single person. That's the weight bearing down on every square inch at the bottom of the trench. Steel doesn't laugh that off. Submarines built for these depths need walls of titanium several inches thick, shaped into a perfect sphere. Why a sphere? Because a ball spreads pressure evenly across its entire surface. Any flat side, any sharp corner, any tiny weak point becomes a target. The ocean finds it. And when the ocean finds a weakness at this depth, it doesn't leak in slowly. It punches through in a fraction of a second. That's what makes this environment so brutal for anything without the right defenses. A human body, unprotected, wouldn't get crushed like the movies show. It would happen faster than that. Air pockets in your lungs would collapse. Gas dissolved in your blood would compress. Death would come before your brain even had time to register what happened. So how does anything survive down there without a titanium shell? The answer is water itself. Unlike your lungs, water barely compresses. Fish living at these depths don't carry pockets of air inside their bodies the way we do. No air-filled lungs, no hollow bones. Their bodies stay packed solid with fluid, matching the pressure pushing in from outside. Inside pressure equals outside pressure. Nothing to crush, nothing to collapse. Their cells even changed at a chemical level over millions of years, adapting proteins and membranes to keep functioning under weight that would liquefy ordinary tissue. Scientists still don't fully understand every detail of how these adaptations work. That part remains an active area of research, not yet a fully solved mystery. What we do know is this: anything built like us, filled with air pockets and rigid structure, becomes scrap metal down there. Anything built like the trench itself, fluid, flexible, pressure-matched, can survive just fine. That single fact split the Mariana Trench into two separate worlds. One where human technology has to fight the ocean just to survive a single dive, and another where creatures have quietly thrived in that same crushing dark for millions of years, completely unbothered. But before we meet those creatures, we need to talk about the first humans who tried to see this place with their own eyes, because getting a machine down there was hard enough. Getting a person down there and back up alive was something else entirely. For most of human history, the deepest parts of our own planet stayed more mysterious than the surface of the moon. Nobody had seen them. Nobody knew what was really down there. That changed in 1960. Two men climbed into a submersible called the Trieste, a steel ball welded beneath a giant float filled with gasoline. Their names were Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh. Their mission sounded almost impossible: reach the bottom of Challenger Deep, nearly 7 miles straight down, in a vessel powered by nothing but gravity to sink and ballast to rise. The descent alone took almost 5 hours. 5 hours of sinking deeper into complete darkness, watching sunlight fade to grey, then to black, then to nothing at all. Every foot added more crushing weight against their tiny steel sphere. One crack, one weak seam, and the ocean would win instantly. Partway down, it almost did. A window pane cracked under the pressure, shaking the entire cabin. Confirmed by their own mission reports, that crack could have ended everything right there. But the seal held. They kept sinking. When they finally touched bottom, they became the first humans to ever see the deepest point on Earth with their own eyes. Think about that scale for a second. We had explored the surface of nearly every continent. We had climbed the tallest mountains. But this single spot on our own ocean floor stayed completely unseen until that moment. What did they find waiting for them in that pitch-black world? We'll get to that. For now, understand what this dive proved. Getting there wasn't the only battle. Surviving long enough to see anything was its own miracle. And once their eyes adjusted to what their lights revealed, They realized this trench wasn't the dead, empty pit that scientists back then expected. That single dive cracked open a door into a world stranger than anyone predicted. And it would take decades before humans returned to look through it again. Something in the Mariana Trench survives by pretending to die. Deep in these black waters lives a creature that flashes light from its own body, then goes completely dark in an instant. Scientists call this counter-illumination and bioluminescent decoys. Certain deep-sea squid and small fish use glowing chemical reactions inside their own bodies to create bursts of light in total darkness. Here's why that matters. In a world with zero sunlight, light itself becomes a weapon. Some creatures use a sudden flash to blind a predator for half a second, buying just enough time to escape into the black. Others release a glowing cloud, like an ink blast made of light instead of shadow, confusing anything that was hunting them. The predator lunges at the glow. The real animal is already gone. Think of it like a magician's trick played out in complete darkness, over and over, every single day, just to survive one more hour. This isn't just one strange animal doing one strange trick. Confirmed research shows the majority of deep-sea creatures produce some form of their own light. Down at these depths, glowing isn't rare, it's normal. It might be the most common survival tool on the entire trench floor. Why did life evolve this way down here? Because normal rules don't apply. On the surface, most predators rely on sunlight to spot prey. Down in the trench, there is no sunlight, so any light at all becomes incredibly powerful, whether it's used to lure, distract, confuse, or communicate. Some anglerfish dangle a glowing lure right above their own mouth, tricking curious prey into swimming close enough to get eaten. Other species use light as a secret language, flashing patterns that only their own kind can recognize in the darkness. Scientists believe some of these light patterns work almost like names, letting creatures identify each other without ever needing to see a face. And that raises a bigger question. If creatures down here have found ways to fake their own death, hide in glowing decoys, and speak entirely through light, what else has evolution figured out in a place humans have barely begun exploring? Because faking death is just the beginning. Some creatures down here don't just avoid being seen. They've reshaped their entire bodies to see in ways that shouldn't be possible at all. Somewhere in the deep Pacific swims a fish with a skull you can see straight through. It's called the barrel-eye fish, and its head is covered in a transparent, fluid-filled dome, almost like a fishbowl built into its own body. Underneath that clear shield sit its eyes, glowing green, tube-shaped, and able to rotate upward inside the fish's own skull. Picture your own eyes swiveling up inside a clear dome on top of your head, scanning for danger above you while the rest of your face stays hidden and still. That's essentially what this fish does every single day, just to survive in a world with almost no light left to see by. For years, scientists were confused by this fish. Early specimens pulled up in nets always arrived damaged, their strange transparent dome torn apart by the trip to the surface. Researchers only had broken pieces to study, and the full picture didn't make sense. That changed when scientists finally filmed a barrel-eye alive in its own environment, using a deep-sea submersible instead of a net. Confirmed footage revealed the truth. The fish's tube-shaped eyes normally point straight up, watching for the faint shadows of prey or predators passing overhead. But those same eyes can rotate forward, letting the fish look ahead when it needs to feed. Why build eyes inside a clear dome instead of just, say, eyes on the sides of its head like most fish? Scientists believe the transparent shield acts like built-in armor. It protects the fish's extremely sensitive eyes from stinging tentacles, since one of its favorite meals happens to be stolen scraps from jellyfish, snatched carefully out of their dangling arms. This is a fish that rewired its own face, just to steal food from one of the ocean's most dangerous drifting hunters. And the barrel-eye isn't alone in reworking basic fish anatomy to survive down here. The deeper you go in the Mariana Trench, the stranger these adaptations get, and the records these creatures hold start to feel less like biology and more like science fiction. which brings us to the deepest fish ever filmed on Earth. In 2017, cameras dropped into the Mariana Trench captured something no one had ever filmed before: a living fish swimming freely at a depth of over 26,000 feet. That's roughly 5 miles straight down. For comparison, that's deeper than the Grand Canyon is wide. At that depth, sunlight has been gone for over 20,000 feet already. This fish spends its entire life in permanent, absolute darkness. The creature is called the Mariana snailfish. Small, pale, almost see-through, with a soft, gelatinous body that looks more like jelly than muscle. It doesn't look tough. It doesn't look like a record holder. But confirmed footage from that expedition proved this exact species survives deeper than any other fish ever documented on the planet. Here's what makes that even stranger. Most fish simply cannot survive past a certain depth. Their proteins physically start to break down under extreme pressure, folding and failing at a molecular level, the same way an overcooked egg turns rubbery and falls apart. Scientists once assumed there had to be a hard depth limit for fish, somewhere around 27,000 feet, past which no fish could survive no matter what. The snailfish sits right at the edge of that predicted limit. Somehow, over millions of years, its body evolved a special molecule that stabilizes its proteins, keeping them from collapsing under the crushing weight of the water above it. Think of it like a natural antifreeze, except instead of blocking ice, it's blocking pressure itself from destroying the fish from the inside out. And it isn't struggling to survive down there. Researchers filmed groups of snailfish gliding calmly along the seafloor, apparently comfortable, hunting for tiny shrimp-like creatures in the mud. Comfortable, 7 miles beneath sunlight, under pressure that would instantly crush a soda can. This discovery forced scientists to rethink what they thought they knew. If a soft, gelatinous fish like this could stretch the known limits of life this far, what other limits are wrong too? Because the snailfish isn't the strangest resident of this trench. Not even close. Some creatures living down here don't just tolerate darkness. Their entire existence depends on it, in ways that break basic rules taught in every school biology class. Some animals in the Mariana Trench have never experienced daylight, not once, not for a single second of their entire lives. Think about that. Every animal you've ever seen, every pet, every bird outside your window, every fish in a home aquarium, exists somewhere touched by sunlight at some point. Down here, that connection breaks completely. Generation after generation, for millions of years, entire species have lived, hunted, and died in total permanent darkness. This creates a strange side effect. Many trench creatures gradually lost the need for working eyes altogether. Some species down here are completely blind, their eyes reduced to useless leftover bumps, because evolution stops investing energy into a sense that offers zero benefit in a lightless world. Building and maintaining eyes costs the body energy. Down in the trench, that energy gets spent elsewhere instead, on senses that actually help you survive. So what replaces sight when there's no light left to see? Touch and vibration take over almost completely. Many trench species developed extremely sensitive whiskers, feelers, or specialized skin that can detect the tiniest vibrations moving through the water. Imagine navigating your entire house with the lights permanently off, but your fingertips became sensitive enough to feel a spider walking across the room. That's roughly the level of sensitivity some of these creatures rely on just to find food and avoid becoming food themselves. Smell becomes another critical lifeline. Certain trench species can detect the chemical trail of a dead animal from remarkable distances, drawn in by faint traces drifting slowly through deep, still water. A single dead fish sinking into the trench can attract scavengers from surprisingly far away, all of them following an invisible chemical map through pure blackness. Here's the part that really breaks expectations, though, because there's no daylight cycle down here, no sunrise, no sunset, entire trench ecosystems run without any real day or night rhythm. Confirmed research shows that many trench species remain active regardless of surface time, unbothered by whether it's noon or midnight thousands of feet above them. Down here, time barely means anything at all. That raises an unsettling question. If life down here abandoned sight completely, restructured its entire sense of time, and adapted to a world with zero sunlight, what other basic rules of biology have these creatures managed to rewrite just to survive? Because sight and time aren't the only things that break down here. Even temperature, one of the most basic requirements for life anywhere on Earth, gets turned completely upside down in certain corners of this trench. Somewhere in the Mariana Trench, a shrimp survives water hot enough to boil, not warm, not uncomfortably hot, boiling. Confirmed temperatures at certain vents in the trench spike above 700 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead, and crawling right beside those blistering vents, tiny shrimp go about their day like it's nothing unusual at all. Here's how that's even possible. These vents, called hydrothermal vents, pump out scorching mineral-rich water that mixes instantly with the freezing deep ocean surrounding it. Within just inches, temperature swings from lead-melting heat to near freezing cold. So these shrimp don't actually bathe in boiling water directly. They ride the very edge of it, positioning their bodies in an incredibly narrow zone where survivable water meets deadly heat. Picture standing so close to a bonfire that your front feels roasting hot while your back stays freezing cold, and getting the positioning exactly right every single moment, or you die instantly. That's essentially the shrimp's entire life. Scientists studying these vent shrimp discovered something else strange. Many of them don't have normal eyes at all. Instead, some species evolved light-sensing patches on their backs, tuned specifically to detect the faint heat glow radiating off the vents themselves. Not sunlight, heat light. A completely different kind of vision, built for a world sunlight never reaches. Why live somewhere this extreme in the first place? Because these vents don't just produce heat, they produce food. Chemicals blasting out of these vents feed massive colonies of bacteria, and those bacteria form the base of an entire food chain built without a single ray of sunlight involved anywhere in the process. The shrimp aren't just tolerating the heat, they're farming it, clustering as close as survivably possible to feast on the bacteria growing right at the edge of danger. This flips one of the most basic rules taught in biology class. Nearly every food chain on the surface of our planet starts with sunlight, captured by plants, passed up through animals that eat those plants. Down here, sunlight plays zero role. None. The entire food chain starts with raw chemicals and heat exploding up from inside the Earth itself. That single fact changes what scientists think life actually requires to exist. If life can build a thriving ecosystem completely disconnected from sunlight, functioning on chemistry and heat alone, deep beneath miles of crushing black ocean, then maybe sunlight was never the strict requirement for life that we always assumed it was. And that idea doesn't just matter for a shrimp beside a vent. It changes where else in our solar system scientists now think life could actually be hiding. But first, we need to look closer at these vents themselves. Because what's erupting out of the seafloor down there looks less like ocean water and more like something out of a volcano. Rising from the seafloor of the Mariana region are structures that look like something built, not grown. Tall, dark, jagged towers, some standing taller than a two-story house, spewing clouds of black smoke into the freezing deep ocean. These are hydrothermal vents, nicknamed black smokers, and they are, confirmed by direct measurement, some of the hottest natural spots on the entire planet. Temperatures blasting out of these chimneys can exceed 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Your kitchen oven, even cranked to its absolute highest setting, tops out around 500 degrees. These vents run far past that, in water that should be near freezing. Here's how they form. Seawater seeps down through cracks in the ocean floor, sinking deep into the Earth's crust until it gets superheated by magma sitting below. That scalding water, now packed full of dissolved minerals, blasts back up through the seafloor under intense pressure. The instant it hits the freezing deep ocean, dissolved metal particles inside it solidify instantly, billowing out like thick black smoke and slowly building these chimney structures, layer by layer, over years. Think of it like a kettle left on the world's most powerful stove, except the kettle is a crack in the Earth's crust, and the steam is loaded with metal. These chimneys aren't just a strange visual, they're the power source for an entire hidden ecosystem. Thick colonies of bacteria coat the rocks near these vents, thriving on the chemicals blasting out. Those bacteria then feed shrimp, worms, crabs, and countless other creatures, all clustered together in a tiny oasis of life, surrounded by miles of empty, freezing black seafloor in every direction. Some tube worms living near these vents grow several feet long and have no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system whatsoever. Instead, they host bacteria living directly inside their own bodies, and those bacteria convert vent chemicals directly into food, feeding the worm from the inside out. It's an entire animal that gave up eating, in the traditional sense, completely. Scientists studying these vents believe they might resemble the exact conditions where life on Earth first began, billions of years ago, long before sunlight ever played a role in fueling anything alive. That's still considered a leading theory, not a fully confirmed fact, but it's one many researchers take seriously. If that theory holds up, these boiling chimneys at the bottom of the Mariana Trench might be sitting on top of something bigger than just a strange ecosystem. They might be sitting near the exact blueprint for how life on our entire planet got started in the first place. And if life could ignite here, in total darkness, fueled by nothing but heat and chemicals, that single idea rewrites where else in our solar system scientists now think life might be hiding. Every science class teaches the same rule. Plants use sunlight to make food. Animals eat plants. That's the foundation of nearly every food chain on Earth. The Mariana Trench breaks that rule completely. Down near those boiling hydrothermal vents, an entire ecosystem thrives without a single ray of sunlight touching it. Instead, it runs on a process called chemosynthesis. Bacteria absorb chemicals blasting out of the vents, mainly a toxic gas called hydrogen sulfide, the same gas that smells like rotten eggs, and convert it directly into energy. No sunlight required. No plants involved at all. Think of it like a car that runs on a completely different kind of fuel than every other car on the road, built from scratch to work in a place regular fuel could never reach. These bacteria form the base of the entire food chain down here. Shrimp eat the bacteria, crabs eat the shrimp, larger fish eat the crabs. An entire miniature world, stacked layer by layer, all traced back to chemicals erupting from inside the Earth instead of light falling from the sky. Confirmed by decades of research since these ecosystems were first discovered, chemosynthesis operates completely independently from the sun. It doesn't just supplement the food chain down here, it replaces sunlight's entire role from the very bottom up. Here's why that discovery mattered so much. Before scientists found these vent communities, nearly everyone assumed sunlight was a strict requirement for any food chain, anywhere, on any planet. Find a place with no light, and you'd expect to find no life. That assumption held for a long time. Then researchers found thriving colonies of shrimp, crabs, worms, and bacteria clustered around scorching vents, in permanent darkness, under crushing pressure, completely disconnected from sunlight in every possible way. And they weren't just barely surviving, they were flourishing. That single discovery didn't just add a new fact to a textbook, it forced scientists to rewrite an entire chapter of biology. And it raised a much bigger question that reaches far beyond this one trench. If life can build a functioning ecosystem powered entirely by chemicals instead of sunlight, in one of the harshest environments on our own planet, where else might that same trick be happening? Because some scientists now believe the answer isn't limited to Earth at all. At the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, scientists found something that shouldn't exist by normal rules of biology. A single-celled organism, over 4 inches long, roughly the size of a fist, just sitting alone on the seafloor. To understand why that's strange, picture a regular amoeba, one of the simplest life forms on Earth, typically so small you'd need a microscope just to see it. Now imagine one large enough to hold in your hand, thriving alone in one of the most crushing, lightless environments our planet has to offer. Scientists call this giant single-celled organism a xenophyophore. Confirmed by direct footage from deep-sea missions, these creatures have been found sitting at depths of over 35,000 feet, right near the deepest point of Challenger Deep itself. Here's what makes it even stranger. A single cell, at that size, breaks basic assumptions about how cells are supposed to work. Regular cells stay small because oxygen and nutrients need to reach every part of the cell efficiently. Scale a single cell up too large, and normally, the center starves before nutrients can reach it. Yet this giant cell survives just fine, spread out flat across the seafloor like a thin, fragile web. Researchers believe its unusual flattened structure might be the key. Instead of forming a compact blob, it spreads out thin and wide, keeping every part of itself close enough to the surrounding water to survive. Picture a pancake instead of a golf ball. More surface area, less distance for nutrients to travel. Scientists still don't fully understand why xenophyophores grow so large in these particular deep trenches specifically. That remains an active area of research, not a fully solved mystery yet. What we do know is this creature thrives in one of the most hostile environments on the entire planet, alone, in crushing pressure, permanent darkness, and near freezing cold, using nothing but a single cell. And it isn't the only overlooked resident of the trench floor rewriting basic biological rules. Because deeper still, inside rock scientists once assumed was completely lifeless, something else was quietly surviving all along. Beneath the floor of the Mariana Trench, scientists drilled into solid rock and found something that shouldn't have been there. Bacteria, alive, sealed inside stone for millions of years. Think about that for a second. Not bacteria living on top of rock or clinging to its surface. Bacteria trapped completely inside it, surrounded on every side by solid mineral, cut off from sunlight, cut off from open water, cut off from almost everything scientists once assumed life needed to survive. Confirmed by direct sampling from deep-sea drilling expeditions, these microbes were found living inside rock formations buried far beneath the seafloor. Some estimates place these bacterial communities at incredibly old ages, potentially surviving in near isolation for extremely long stretches of time, some possibly stretching back millions of years. How does anything survive locked inside solid stone for that long? These bacteria appear to run on an extremely slow, minimal version of life. Picture a phone battery in the lowest possible power-saving mode, barely running any functions at all, just enough to avoid completely shutting down. Some of these microbes may divide and reproduce only once every few thousand years, an almost frozen pace of life compared to bacteria living on the surface, which can multiply within minutes. Here's why this discovery matters so much. It completely shattered old assumptions about where the boundary of life actually sits. Scientists used to draw a line and say, past this point, in rock this deep, under conditions this extreme, nothing could possibly survive. That line kept moving deeper and deeper every time researchers drilled further down and kept finding life anyway. This isn't just a strange discovery about one trench. It changes how scientists think about life across our entire solar system. If bacteria can survive locked inside solid rock, cut off from sunlight and open water for potentially millions of years right here on Earth, then similar rock buried beneath the surface of other planets might not be as lifeless as we once assumed either. And that idea leads directly to one specific planet scientists keep coming back to. Because what researchers found buried in the Mariana Trench might be quietly rewriting the odds of finding life somewhere far beyond our own planet entirely. Some scientists believe a creature found in the Mariana Trench could survive on Mars. That's not science fiction talk. That's a real, active area of scientific research. Certain microbes discovered in the trench's most extreme zones Thriving under crushing pressure, near freezing cold, and zero sunlight, share survival traits that closely match conditions found on the Martian surface and buried beneath Martian ice. Here's the connection. Mars is cold, dry, and blasted with radiation, with an atmosphere far too thin to block harmful rays the way Earth's atmosphere does. For decades, that combination made Mars look like an extremely unlikely place for life to survive. But the deep Mariana Trench, in its own way, is also cold, dark, cut off from sunlight, and crushed under extreme pressure. And life not only survives there, it thrives there. Certain trench microbes have evolved specialized proteins and cell membranes that hold together under conditions that would tear apart a normal surface bacteria. Scientists studying these microbes believe similar biological tricks could theoretically allow life to survive in briny, extremely cold pockets of liquid water believed to exist beneath the Martian surface today. Picture a life form so tough it treats crushing ocean pressure the way you'd treat a light breeze, barely registering it as a threat at all. That's the baseline survival skill scientists are now studying and comparing directly to what conditions on Mars might require. This remains a theory, not a confirmed discovery. Nobody has found life on Mars. Nobody has proven trench bacteria could actually survive making that journey and adapting to Martian ground. But the comparison excites scientists precisely because it flips an old assumption on its head. For a long time, Mars looked hopeless for life, specifically because it seemed too extreme, too cold, too hostile, too disconnected from sunlight. The trench proves that combination of conditions alone doesn't rule life out. If anything, it does the opposite. It suggests that extreme, sunless, crushing environments might actually be common hiding spots for life, both here on Earth and possibly on other worlds too. That single idea quietly shifted how many scientists now search for life beyond our planet. Instead of only searching for Earth-like conditions, warm oceans, breathable air, gentle sunlight, some researchers now specifically study extreme environments like the Mariana Trench as a working blueprint for what alien life might actually require to survive elsewhere. And that raises an unsettling thought. If the trench is quietly teaching us where to look for life on other worlds, what else is falling from our own world down into this same crushing darkness that we haven't accounted for yet? Because it turns out, this trench doesn't just host ancient bacteria and pressure-proof microbes. It also collects something falling from thousands of feet above it every single day, like slow-motion snowfall through the dark. 7 miles beneath the surface, it snows in the Mariana Trench. Not water, snow. Something stranger. Scientists call it marine snow, a constant, slow drift of tiny particles falling from the sunlit surface all the way down into the crushing dark below. Dead plankton, bits of shell, waste from countless surface creatures, flakes of organic material clumping together, sinking for days, sometimes weeks, before finally settling onto the trench floor. Picture standing outside during a snowstorm, except every single flake used to be part of something alive. Here's why this matters so much. Down at the bottom of the trench, sunlight is completely gone, and nothing grows locally the way plants grow on land. So this slow, constant snowfall from above becomes one of the only food sources reaching that deep. Confirmed by decades of deep-sea research, marine snow forms the base of many trench food chains, quietly feeding creatures that will never once see the sunlight, where that food originally came from. The trip down takes a surprisingly long time. Some particles drift for weeks before finally reaching bottom, slowly sinking through nearly 7 miles of open water the entire way. By the time it lands, marine snow has traveled farther, vertically, than most people will ever travel in their entire lives, just to become a single meal for a creature living in permanent darkness. Creatures on the trench floor evolved specifically to catch this falling food. Some filter it directly from the water. Others wait patiently on the seafloor for it to settle, then feed directly off the buildup. In an environment with almost no other food source, this slow-motion snowfall becomes an absolute lifeline. But here's the unsettling part. Marine snow doesn't just carry dead plankton and organic waste anymore. Confirmed by scientific sampling, modern marine snow increasingly carries something else drifting down alongside it: human waste, microplastics, chemical pollution generated on the surface, slowly sinking down into the one place on Earth many people assumed human impact could never reach. Which means this trench, the most remote, most isolated, most inaccessible place on our entire planet, isn't actually cut off from human activity at all. Whatever we generate up here, whatever gets thrown away, whatever spills into the ocean, has already found its way down there, constantly, quietly, for decades. And what scientists eventually found sitting at the very bottom of that snowfall didn't just surprise them, it disturbed them. In 2019, an explorer reached the very bottom of the Mariana Trench and found a plastic bag. Confirmed by direct footage from that dive, a plastic bag was spotted resting on the seafloor at the deepest point on our entire planet, deeper than any fish has ever been recorded swimming. Nearly 7 miles down, in the most remote, hardest to reach location on Earth, sat a piece of ordinary household trash. Think about the scale of that for a second. To reach that spot, a piece of plastic had to sink through nearly 7 miles of open ocean, past crushing pressure zones, past total darkness, past depths that destroy submarines without the right protection, and simply kept going, all the way down to the absolute bottom. This wasn't a rare, one-time discovery either. Confirmed by multiple research expeditions, scientists have repeatedly found plastic waste and other human trash scattered across the Mariana Trench floor. Some samples taken from creatures living at extreme depths have tested positive for microplastic particles already inside their bodies, meaning plastic pollution isn't just resting on the seafloor, it has already entered the trench's food chain. Here's why that fact hits so hard. This is the single most remote, least explored, hardest to physically reach location on the surface of our entire planet. If human trash can find its way down here, that means there is functionally no location left on Earth that human impact hasn't already reached in some form. Researchers believe most of this trash doesn't fall straight down from directly above. Instead, ocean currents slowly carry pollution from the surface across huge distances, eventually funneling large amounts of it directly into deep ocean trenches like Mariana, almost like the trench acts as a giant drain at the bottom of the entire ocean. That comparison isn't just poetic, it's functionally accurate. Trenches sit at the lowest points of the seafloor, and heavier debris naturally settles into these low points over time, the same way dust and debris collect in the lowest corner of a room instead of spreading evenly across the floor. Which means the deepest, most untouched place on our planet has quietly become one of the final resting spots for our garbage, whether we intended that or not. And the story gets stranger from here, because trash wasn't the only surprising thing scientists found scattered across the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Sometimes, that trash inadvertently becomes home to something new. In a strange twist, scientists studying the Mariana Trench discovered a brand new species living directly beside human garbage, close enough that researchers ended up naming the creature partly after the trash itself. The animal is a tiny amphipod, a small shrimp-like creature, discovered thriving at extreme trench depths. Confirmed by the researchers who first described this species, they chose part of its scientific name specifically to highlight the plastic pollution found contaminating its habitat, using the naming moment as a direct, permanent statement about the trash already reaching Earth's most remote depths. Think about what that means. A brand new species, previously unknown to science, entirely unique to this planet, and its very first official scientific record permanently links it to human garbage. Not a volcano, not a rare mineral, garbage. Researchers studying this amphipod found microplastic fibers already present inside its body. Confirmed through direct tissue sampling, this wasn't an isolated, unlucky animal that happened to swallow a stray piece of plastic once. Multiple specimens tested showed the same contamination, suggesting plastic exposure had already become a normal, everyday part of life for this species, in a place few humans have ever even seen. Here's what makes that especially unsettling. This creature likely evolved in near total isolation in one of the most remote environments on the entire planet, quite possibly without ever encountering a single human being directly. And yet, by the time scientists finally discovered it, plastic pollution had already arrived first. Picture meeting a completely new species for the very first time and finding out human trash got there before you did. Scientists believe this amphipod likely feeds on the same marine snow drifting down from the surface that other trench creatures rely on for food, which means the plastic isn't just floating past this species. It's most likely already inside its actual food source, entering its body every single time it eats a normal meal. This single discovery became a powerful symbol for scientists, proof that human impact has reached even the parts of our planet we've barely begun to explore, permanently written directly into the scientific name of a brand new species. And trash isn't the only unexpected human trace scientists found buried in the Mariana Trench, because decades before plastic pollution became a global concern, something else had already been quietly sinking down into that same crushing darkness. Buried in the Mariana Trench, scientists found traces of nuclear weapons testing conducted decades ago on the surface. Confirmed by scientific sampling, radioactive carbon from nuclear bomb tests conducted in the 1950s and 1960s has been detected inside the tissue of creatures living at extreme trench depths. That radioactive signature, created above ground during Cold War-era weapons testing, somehow made its way down into one of the most remote, hardest-to-reach places on the entire planet. Think about the distance that trace had to travel. Released into the atmosphere decades ago, drifting down into surface oceans, slowly sinking through nearly 7 miles of open water, before finally settling into the tissue of creatures living permanently in total darkness at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Here's how scientists believe it made that journey. That same marine snow we talked about earlier, the slow-motion snowfall of dead organic material drifting down from the surface, likely carried these radioactive traces down along with it. Surface creatures absorbed radioactive particles released during testing. Those creatures eventually died, sank, and became part of that same constant food supply feeding the trench floor far below. Which means something released into our atmosphere decades ago is still actively cycling through one of the most remote food chains on the entire planet right now, today. Confirmed by researchers who conducted this sampling, radioactive levels detected in trench creatures were notably higher than expected, given how disconnected this environment seemed from surface human activity. That single detail proved something important. Even a place this remote, this deep, this isolated, isn't actually isolated from human activity at all. Picture an event from decades ago, involving weapons testing conducted entirely on the surface of our planet, still leaving an active, measurable trace inside a food chain, located nearly 7 miles straight down, in a place almost no human being has ever physically visited. This discovery forced scientists to rethink just how connected our entire planet really is. The Mariana Trench isn't a separate, sealed-off world. It's directly linked to everything happening on the surface, whether that's plastic pollution, chemical waste, or radioactive fallout from events that happened generations ago. And if human impact from the 1950s is still actively cycling through the trench today, that raises an unsettling question about what else might be traveling down into that darkness that scientists haven't fully traced yet. Because pollution and radiation aren't the only things drifting through the Mariana Trench that once left scientists confused. Something else came from the trench itself, a sound so strange that it took years and international speculation before anyone figured out what was really making it. In 2014, underwater microphones near the Mariana Trench picked up a sound nobody could identify. Researchers nicknamed it the Western Pacific Biotwang, a strange, layered noise, part groan, part metallic whir, unlike anything scientists had recorded in the ocean before. It didn't match any known ship engine. It didn't match any known whale call on record. For a while, nobody had an answer. Picture hearing a sound so unfamiliar that trained scientists, people who spend their entire careers listening to ocean recordings, couldn't immediately place it. That's exactly what happened here. The sound spread across a huge range of frequencies all at once. Low rumbling tones mixed with sharp, high-pitched metallic bursts, almost like something scraping metal deep underwater. Confirmed recordings captured this same strange call repeatedly across multiple locations near the trench, ruling out the idea that it was some kind of rare, one-time glitch in the equipment. For a while, theories got wild. Some wondered if it was some undiscovered deep-sea creature nobody had ever documented before. Others guessed broken equipment, shifting seafloor rock, or noise from distant ships, because so little of the deep ocean has ever been explored. Ruling out a new, unknown source didn't seem far-fetched at all. Researchers eventually traced the sound back to a much more familiar source, an animal already known to science. Confirmed through careful analysis, the biotwang came from a specific type of baleen whale, a bride's whale, producing a call unlike any previously documented in that species anywhere else on Earth. Here's why that still matters. Even with a confirmed answer, scientists have studied whale calls for decades. Yet a completely new, previously undocumented vocal pattern was still hiding out near this trench, unnoticed, until modern recording equipment finally picked it up. If a sound this strange, made by an animal already known to science, stayed hidden for this long, what else is echoing through that same darkness that nobody has recorded yet? Because the ocean near the Mariana Trench doesn't just carry unfamiliar animal calls. It also carries the kind of movement that starts on the seafloor and ends in absolute devastation on land. When a whale dies far out at sea, its body eventually sinks, and when it lands near the Mariana Trench, something remarkable happens. That single skeleton becomes an entire ecosystem, feeding trench life for decades. Scientists call this a whale fall. A massive body, sometimes as long as a school bus, drifting down through nearly 7 miles of open water before finally settling onto the trench floor. What happens next unfolds in stages, slowly, over years. At first, scavengers arrive fast. Sleeper sharks and other large predators strip away soft tissue within months, tearing through blubber and muscle in a feeding frenzy that can strip a body down to bone shockingly fast. Picture an entire school bus reduced to a bare frame, consumed piece by creatures that may go months between meals otherwise. Once the soft tissue is gone, a second wave of life moves in. Worms, crabs, and countless smaller scavengers pick apart whatever remains, breaking the skeleton down bit by bit. This stage alone can last for years. Then comes the strangest part. Once the bones themselves are exposed, a third, highly specialized community moves in. Creatures that exist almost nowhere else on Earth except directly on the bones of a dead whale. Confirmed by direct observation of multiple whale falls. These specialized bone-dwelling creatures can continue feeding off a single skeleton for decades after the whale first died. Think about that timeline. One animal, one death, feeding an entire evolving community of trench life for years, sometimes decades, long after every other trace of that whale would have vanished anywhere else in the ocean. Why does this matter so much? Because food is incredibly scarce at these depths. A single whale fall can deliver more food to the trench floor in one event than that same patch of seafloor might otherwise see over centuries. It's less like a meal and more like an entire buffet dropped from the sky, feeding generation after generation of creatures uniquely adapted to take advantage of it. Scientists studying whale falls believe these events might explain how certain deep-sea species survive at all in such a food-scarce environment. Without periodic whale falls delivering massive bursts of nutrients, some specialized trench communities might not have enough food to sustain themselves long-term. And some of the creatures that show up specifically for this event exist absolutely nowhere else on Earth, not near the vents. not in the marine snow. Only here, on whale bones, hidden in a place almost no human being will ever witness firsthand. Deep on the floor of the Mariana Trench, live creatures that exist nowhere else in the world, found only on the bones of dead whales. Scientists call them bone-eating worms, and their official scientific name translates roughly to bone-eating zombie worm. These creatures have no mouth and no stomach, similar to the vent tube worms mentioned earlier. Instead, they drill directly into whale bone using root-like structures, releasing acid that dissolves solid bone from the outside in. Picture roots from a tree slowly cracking through solid concrete, except these roots are dissolving bone instead, feeding on the fat and oil trapped deep inside skeletal tissue that would otherwise stay locked away forever. Confirmed through direct research, these worms host bacteria living inside their own root-like structures, and those bacteria break down the fats and oils found inside whale bone into usable energy. The worm itself never eats in any traditional sense. It survives entirely off nutrients its own bacteria produce from digesting bone, from the inside out. Here's what makes this discovery even stranger. Scientists have found that these bone-eating worms release huge numbers of microscopic offspring into the surrounding water, constantly waiting patiently for the extremely rare moment when a new whale fall might land somewhere nearby. Most of those offspring will never find a skeleton in time and simply die, but the sheer number released means at least some will eventually get lucky. Think of it like buying millions of lottery tickets, over and over, generation after generation, because the prize, an entire whale skeleton loaded with food, is worth an almost unbelievable payoff if you happen to win. This strategy reveals something important about life in the Mariana Trench overall. Food arrives rarely, unpredictably, and in short, intense bursts. So creatures here evolved extreme, sometimes bizarre strategies just to make sure they don't miss their chance when food finally does show up. Scientists believe there may be several different species of these bone-eating worms, each one potentially specialized for slightly different depths, temperatures, or bone types. Since whale falls happen so rarely and in such a hard-to-reach environment, this remains an active, ongoing area of research rather than a fully complete picture. What we do know for certain is this: an entire specialized branch of life, unlike anything found anywhere else on the planet, evolved specifically to wait for, find, and consume the bones of a single dead whale sunk 7 miles beneath the surface of the ocean. And while these creatures quietly wait for food to fall from above, forces far more violent are building steadily beneath the trench floor itself. We touched on this pressure earlier, but it's worth feeling the full weight of it again, because this single number explains almost everything strange about life in the Mariana Trench. At the bottom of Challenger Deep, water pressure exceeds 16,000 pounds per square inch. Scientists commonly compare that to the weight of about 50 jumbo jets, stacked directly on top of a single human body. Not 50 jumbo jets spread across a football field, 50 jumbo jets compressed down onto one single person, all at once. Picture the weight of one commercial airplane. Now multiply that by 50, and imagine every ounce of it pressing down on you at the exact same moment, from every single direction, all at once. This pressure isn't just intense at the very bottom either. It builds steadily and relentlessly the entire way down, adding roughly 1 additional atmosphere of pressure for approximately every 33 feet you descend. By the time you've gone as deep as a football field measures long, you're already experiencing several times the pressure you feel standing on land. Here's why this single fact explains so much of what we've already covered. It's the reason submarines need thick titanium spheres instead of flat walls. It's the reason deep-sea fish evolved fluid-filled, air-free bodies instead of the air-filled lungs land animals rely on. It's the reason bacteria buried in solid rock evolved specialized proteins just to keep from collapsing under the crushing weight above them, confirmed by direct measurement using pressure sensors on multiple deep-sea missions. This trench holds some of the highest naturally occurring pressure found anywhere on the surface of our entire planet. Only a small handful of other ocean trenches even come close to matching it. Scientists studying trench life describe this pressure as the single biggest filter, separating what can survive down here from what absolutely cannot. Cross that pressure threshold without the right biological adaptations, or without the right engineering protecting you, and death happens in a fraction of a second, faster than your brain could even process what went wrong. That single, brutal fact is exactly why so few humans have ever attempted to travel to the very bottom of this trench. And it's exactly why the ones who did needed to prepare for a journey unlike almost anything else our species has ever attempted. If a human tried to free fall to the bottom of the Mariana Trench with no protection at all, their body wouldn't survive anywhere close to the bottom. Here's what would actually happen, step by step. As you sink, pressure builds fast, adding roughly 1 additional atmosphere for every 33 feet you descend. Within the first 100 feet, your lungs already start compressing. Any air trapped inside your body, in your lungs, your sinuses, even tiny pockets in your inner ear, gets crushed inward by the surrounding pressure. Picture squeezing an empty plastic water bottle in your hand until it crumples. Now imagine that same crushing force acting on your own lungs and chest cavity, except you have no way to stop it, and it just keeps getting worse the deeper you go. By around 1,000 feet, pressure alone would likely cause fatal injuries in an unprotected human body. Blood vessels can rupture, lungs can collapse completely, and that's barely 2% of the total distance to the bottom of the trench. Confirmed by decades of research into deep-sea diving physiology, human bodies are built for the pressure we experience living on land, roughly 15 pounds per square inch. We're built for a specific, narrow range of pressure, and the ocean blows past that range extremely fast once you start sinking. This is exactly why every successful mission to the bottom of Challenger Deep required an incredibly specialized submersible, not a regular submarine, something built specifically to withstand pressure that would instantly destroy standard underwater vessels. Thick titanium walls, a perfectly rounded sphere shape, distributing crushing force evenly across the entire surface instead of concentrating it on any single weak point. Even with that protection, the margin for error stays incredibly thin. A single tiny crack, a single weak seam, and the ocean finds it instantly, with catastrophic results. Which brings us back to the two men who first proved a journey like this was even possible. Because when Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh finally reached the bottom in 1960, they weren't just facing scientific unknowns. They were trusting their lives entirely to a steel sphere, betting that human engineering could actually hold back this crushing amount of ocean pressure long enough to get them back to the surface alive. In 1960, two men became the first humans in history to reach the deepest point on planet Earth. Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh climbed into a submersible called the Trieste, a steel sphere hanging beneath a massive float filled with gasoline for buoyancy. Their target was Challenger Deep, the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, nearly 7 miles straight down. The descent took almost 5 hours. 5 hours of sinking slowly through complete darkness, watching the last traces of sunlight disappear far above them, replaced by nothing but black water and the glow of their own instrument panel. Picture sealing yourself inside a metal ball roughly the size of a small car, then sinking for 5 straight hours into complete darkness, fully aware that a single structural failure means instant death with absolutely no way to escape or get help in time. Partway through the descent, disaster nearly struck. A window pane cracked under the crushing pressure, shaking the entire cabin violently. Confirmed by their own official mission reports, that crack could have ended the mission and their lives in an instant. But the outer seal held just long enough, and they continued their descent toward the bottom. When they finally touched down on the seafloor, they became the first human beings in history to see the deepest point on our entire planet with their own eyes. Nearly 7 miles of crushing ocean sat above them, pressing down with a force strong enough to instantly destroy an unprotected submarine. Think about the scale of that achievement. Humans had already explored nearly every continent on Earth. We'd climbed the tallest mountains. Yet this single point, right here on our own home planet, stayed completely unseen until this exact moment in 1960. They stayed at the bottom for only about 20 minutes before beginning their long ascent back toward the surface. 20 minutes, after years of preparation and nearly 5 hours of descent, spent at the very edge of what human engineering could survive at the time. But what exactly did they see, waiting for them in that pitch-black world, 7 miles beneath everything familiar to our entire species? When Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh finally reached the bottom of Challenger Deep in 1960, they expected to find an empty, lifeless pit. They didn't. Confirmed by their own official mission reports, as their submersible settled onto the seafloor, their exterior lights illuminating a world no human eye had ever witnessed before. They reported spotting what appeared to be a flatfish resting on the bottom, nearly 7 miles beneath the ocean surface. Picture the shock of that moment. After years of preparation, after nearly 5 hours of sinking through total darkness, after nearly losing everything when their window cracked partway down, the very first thing they saw, waiting for them at the bottom of the world, was a living creature, calmly resting on the seafloor, like it belonged there completely. At the time, this single observation completely upended existing scientific assumptions. Many scientists before this mission believed depths this extreme, this dark, this crushing, simply couldn't support complex animal life like fish. The pressure alone seemed impossible to survive. The complete absence of sunlight seemed impossible to build a food chain around. And yet, sitting right there in their own spotlight, resting calmly on the seafloor, was a fish. This observation has faced some debate among scientists in the decades since, with some researchers questioning whether the creature they briefly spotted was truly a fish or possibly a different type of animal entirely. What remains beyond dispute, confirmed repeatedly by nearly every research mission that followed, is that Challenger Deep is not the empty, lifeless pit scientists once assumed it had to be. Piccard and Don Walsh only had 20 minutes at the bottom before beginning their long return to the surface. 20 minutes to look around, to absorb an environment no human being had ever personally witnessed, before starting the slow climb back up through nearly 7 miles of crushing black water above them. It would take over 50 years before anyone attempted that same journey again. And when someone finally did, they wouldn't have a research partner sitting beside them. They'd be making that same terrifying descent completely alone. In 2012, more than 50 years after the first dive, one man returned to the bottom of Challenger Deep. This time, completely alone. Filmmaker and explorer James Cameron piloted a specially built submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger, straight down to the deepest point on Earth, solo, sealed inside a vertical titanium sphere, barely large enough to fit one person curled into a tight sitting position. Picture folding yourself into a space, roughly the size of a phone booth, then sinking alone for hours through total darkness, with absolutely nobody beside you to help if anything goes wrong, and nearly 7 miles of crushing ocean building steadily above you the entire way down. Confirmed by mission records, the descent took less than 3 hours, notably faster than the 5-hour descent Piccard and Walsh experienced back in 1960, thanks to major advances in submersible design over those 50-plus years. This new vessel was built specifically to sink straight down like a dart, then rotate upright once it reached the bottom, allowing far more efficient movement and observation once it arrived. Once he touched down, Cameron spent nearly 3 hours exploring the seafloor alone, roughly 9 times longer than the original 20-minute visit back in 1960. That extra time let him collect samples, film extensive footage, and document trench life in far greater detail than anything captured during that very first historic dive. Here's what made this mission especially remarkable. Cameron wasn't a career scientist or a trained Navy officer. He helped personally fund and help design the very vessel that carried him down there, driven by a personal fascination with deep-sea exploration that started decades before this dive ever happened. Confirmed by direct footage from his expedition, Cameron documented strange, tiny amphipod creatures swarming across the seafloor, along with detailed footage of the trench environment itself, providing scientists with some of the clearest, most detailed footage of Challenger Deep ever captured up to that point. This solo mission proved something important. The original 1960 dive wasn't a lucky, one-time fluke that could never be repeated. Human engineering had advanced enough that reaching the deepest point on Earth, alone, without a research partner beside you, had become achievable again. But diving to the trench, whether alone or with a partner, always carries enormous risk. And not every mission involving these extreme depths has ended safely. Diving into the Mariana Trench pushes submarine engineering to its absolute limit, and when something goes wrong at these depths, there's often no time to react at all. We already covered one close call. During the original 1960 dive, a window pane on the Trieste cracked partway through the descent, shaking the entire cabin and nearly ending the mission right there. Confirmed by Pickard and Walsh's own reports, the outer seal held just long enough for them to complete their historic dive safely. But that moment reveals something critical about diving to these depths. At 16,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, there's no room for gradual failure, no slow leak, no warning sound building up over several seconds, giving you time to react. A structural failure at this depth happens almost instantly, over in a fraction of a second, faster than a human body could physically respond. Picture the difference between a tire slowly losing air over the course of a day, compared to a tire blowing out completely at highway speed. Now scale that difference up dramatically, because pressure at these depths is measured in thousands of pounds per square inch, not the roughly 30 pounds sitting inside a normal car tire. This is exactly why every successful deep trench mission depends on obsessive engineering and redundant safety checks. Every seam, every window, every seal on a deep-sea submersible gets tested and retested extensively before ever being trusted with a human life. Engineers specifically designed these vessels using rounded, sphere-shaped hulls, because that particular shape distributes crushing pressure as evenly as physically possible across the entire surface, dramatically reducing the risk of a single catastrophic weak point developing anywhere. Even with all of that intense preparation, the fundamental risk never fully disappears. Anyone climbing into a submersible bound for Challenger Deep is trusting their life completely to a machine operating at the outer edge of what human engineering can currently survive. That single truth explains why so few missions have ever attempted this exact journey throughout our entire history. It also explains why every successful dive from 1960 all the way through more recent expeditions gets remembered as a genuine milestone in human exploration, not a routine, everyday accomplishment. And the risks at these depths aren't limited to submarine engineering alone, because the trench itself, the seafloor, the crust beneath it, holds forces capable of shaking entire coastlines thousands of miles away. The Mariana Trench doesn't just hold crushing pressure and strange creatures. It also produces some of the most powerful earthquakes on the entire planet. Remember how this trench actually formed. One massive piece of Earth's crust, the Pacific Plate, slides steadily underneath another piece, the Philippine Plate. That process, called subduction, doesn't happen smoothly, like two rugs gliding past each other. It happens in sudden, violent jolts, as built-up pressure between these two massive plates finally releases all at once. Picture pressing your hands together and slowly sliding them past each other. Most of the time they slip smoothly, but every so often, friction catches, tension builds, and then suddenly releases in one sharp, violent jerk. Now, Scale that same basic idea up to the size of entire tectonic plates, each one far larger and heavier than any mountain range on the surface of our planet. Confirmed by seismic monitoring stations positioned around the Pacific region, subduction zones like the Mariana Trench are directly responsible for producing some of the largest, most powerful earthquakes ever recorded anywhere on Earth. This exact type of tectonic boundary, plates violently colliding and sliding beneath each other, has generated some of the most destructive earthquakes in modern recorded history. Here's why this specific type of earthquake carries extra danger beyond the shaking itself. When it happens deep underwater, along a fault line running directly beneath the ocean, it can suddenly and violently displace a massive volume of seawater sitting directly above it. That sudden displacement can trigger a tsunami, a wall of ocean water capable of racing across entire oceans and devastating coastlines thousands of miles away from where the earthquake actually occurred. Think of it like a single massive push starting way out in open water, then racing outward in every direction, growing in destructive power as it approaches shallow water near a coastline, eventually crashing on shore with devastating force. The Mariana Trench itself sits in a region considered geologically active, part of a much larger, famous ring of underwater fault lines, circling almost the entire Pacific Ocean, nicknamed the Ring of Fire by scientists for its intense volcanic and earthquake activity. This means the same crushing trench holding bizarre, glowing creatures, ancient bacteria, and pressure-proof fish also sits directly on top of one of the most seismically dangerous regions found anywhere on our entire planet. And scientists studying this exact region have identified a specific fault line running near the trench that concerns them even more than the trench itself. Near the Mariana Trench, scientists have identified a fault line capable of producing an earthquake far more devastating than anything that region has experienced in recorded history. This particular boundary sits along the edge where the Pacific Plate continues its slow, grinding collision with the Philippine Plate, the exact same tectonic process responsible for carving out the trench itself in the first place. But certain sections of this fault appear to be locked, meaning built-up pressure isn't releasing gradually through smaller, more frequent earthquakes. Picture holding a rubber band and slowly stretching it further and further, but instead of gradually flexing bit by bit, it stays perfectly rigid the entire time, storing up increasing tension with absolutely no release, until it finally snaps all at once, all that stored energy exploding out in a single violent instant. That's essentially what concerns scientists studying certain locked sections of fault lines throughout this region. Instead of releasing pressure gradually through smaller, more frequent earthquakes, the tension keeps building silently, year after year, decade after decade, stored up completely out of sight, deep beneath miles of open ocean. Confirmed by geological research studying subduction zones around the world, when a heavily locked fault section finally does release, it can trigger what scientists call a megathrust earthquake, among the most powerful and destructive earthquakes possible anywhere on our entire planet. These exact types of fault lines have produced some of the most devastating earthquakes and tsunamis in modern recorded history in other subduction zones located elsewhere around the Pacific region. This remains an active, ongoing area of scientific monitoring, not a confirmed prediction of when or exactly where a major quake might strike next. Scientists cannot currently predict the specific timing of any earthquake with precision, but the underlying geological risk itself is confirmed and taken seriously by researchers who study this region closely. Here's why this matters beyond just the immediate region surrounding the trench itself. A significant earthquake originating from this exact area could potentially trigger a tsunami capable of reaching coastlines thousands of miles away, impacting countless coastal communities that might otherwise feel completely disconnected from a remote underwater trench most people will never even see or think about. That single fact transforms the Mariana Trench from a distant, mysterious curiosity into something with the potential to directly impact human lives across an enormous stretch of our planet, all originating from geological forces building silently beneath miles of crushing, lightless ocean water. And earthquakes aren't the only violent force scientists have discovered hiding beneath this trench, because recently, researchers stumbled onto something else entirely, something nobody expected to find hiding down there at all. Hidden beneath the Mariana Trench region, scientists discovered something nobody fully expected to find: active volcanoes, tucked into one of the most extreme, least explored environments on the entire planet. Confirmed by direct deep-sea surveys, researchers identified underwater volcanic activity connected to the broader Mariana region, adding yet another layer of extreme geological force to an area already famous for crushing pressure and violent tectonic activity. Picture a volcano, the same violent, fiery force capable of destroying entire landscapes on the surface, except this one sits hidden beneath miles of freezing black ocean water, its eruptions completely invisible from anywhere above the surface. Here's what makes underwater volcanic activity especially strange compared to volcanoes on land. Enormous ocean pressure at these depths actually suppresses the kind of massive, explosive eruptions you'd typically picture happening on the surface, complete with towering ash clouds and dramatic lava fountains blasting into open sky. Instead, underwater eruptions in this region tend to release lava and gas more slowly, seeping and flowing directly into the surrounding deep ocean water, instead of exploding dramatically upward into open air. Confirmed by direct observation from research missions, some of these underwater volcanic events actively support unique, specialized ecosystems, similar in some ways to the chemical-powered communities found thriving near hydrothermal vents elsewhere throughout the trench region. Heat and chemicals released from volcanic activity provide yet another completely separate energy source, powering pockets of life that have nothing at all to do with sunlight reaching down from the surface above. This discovery reveals something important about the Mariana Trench region as a whole. It isn't just one single massive crack sitting quietly in the ocean floor. It's an active, constantly shifting geological zone, packed full of volcanic activity, earthquake risk, and violent tectonic movement, all happening simultaneously beneath miles of crushing black water most people will never see or fully appreciate. Scientists continue actively studying this exact region, specifically because so much of it remains completely unexplored and undocumented. Every single new expedition into these waters has a genuine chance of discovering an entirely new volcanic feature or an entirely new species living directly beside it that nobody even knew existed before that specific mission. And volcanic activity isn't the only thing scientists have caught happening deep beneath the trench in real time. Recently, researchers managed to capture something else entirely: the seafloor itself, actively moving, for the very first time ever caught directly on camera. For the first time ever, scientists managed to capture the seafloor near the Mariana Trench actually shifting and moving, directly on camera. This might sound strange at first. Isn't the seafloor just gently sitting there? Solid ground, unmoving, the same way solid ground behaves on the surface of the continents we live on? For most of human history, that's exactly what everyone assumed. Solid rock, fixed in place, essentially permanent, on any timescale a normal human being could ever witness directly. Confirmed through detailed seafloor mapping and monitoring conducted around active subduction zones like the Mariana region, scientists have documented measurable seafloor movement directly connected to the same tectonic forces responsible for generating earthquakes throughout this entire area. Picture standing on what looks like perfectly solid, stable ground, having absolutely no idea that beneath your feet, that same ground is actively shifting, stretching, and straining, all happening at a pace far too slow and far too subtle for human eyes to notice directly without extremely precise scientific instruments. This movement connects directly back to the same locked fault sections we discussed earlier. As two massive tectonic plates continue grinding steadily against each other deep beneath the trench, certain sections of the seafloor slowly deform and shift in response, storing up tension gradually over time before eventually releasing that built-up energy suddenly in the form of a significant earthquake, confirmed by advanced monitoring technology, including extremely precise seafloor sensors and satellite tracking systems. Scientists can now measure movement occurring at incredibly small scales, sometimes tracking shifts of just a few inches, occurring gradually across multiple years. That might sound insignificant at first glance, but across an area as massive as an entire tectonic plate boundary, even a small, steady shift like that represents an absolutely enormous amount of built-up geological energy slowly accumulating beneath the surface. Here's why this discovery matters so much to scientists studying this exact region. Directly observing this kind of movement in real time helps researchers understand precisely how, where, and potentially even when built-up tectonic stress might eventually release as a major, significant earthquake somewhere along this fault system. This remains a genuinely active area of ongoing scientific research. Scientists still cannot precisely predict the specific timing of a major earthquake with confidence, but being able to directly measure this hidden movement, happening continuously and completely invisibly beneath thousands of feet of crushing black ocean water, gives researchers dramatically more insight than they've ever had before into exactly how this dangerous region actually behaves. And it's not the only signal coming from deep within this trench that has captured scientific attention in recent years. Because sound isn't the only mysterious signal that's emerged from this remote region. Something else was once picked up, and for a brief moment, some wondered if it might not be from our planet at all. A strange signal picked up near the Mariana Trench once left scientists wondering, for a brief moment, if it might not have come from Earth at all. We already covered one mysterious sound from this region, the Western Pacific biotwang, eventually traced back to a specific whale species. But that wasn't the only unexplained signal detected near this trench that briefly stumped researchers and sparked genuine public speculation. Confirmed by researchers monitoring underwater recordings from this region, several unusual acoustic signals have been picked up over the years that didn't immediately match any known, catalogued source. In a world with detailed records of ship engines, known whale species, and standard ocean background noise, a signal that doesn't fit any of those categories immediately draws intense scientific attention. Picture spending your entire career studying ocean sounds, having heard thousands of recordings from ships, whales, and underwater equipment, and then suddenly hearing something that matches absolutely nothing in your extensive personal experience. When unexplained signals like this surface, speculation naturally follows, especially online, where theories can spread incredibly fast. Some wondered about undiscovered deep-sea creatures. Others, jokingly, and sometimes seriously, floated more dramatic explanations involving extraterrestrial origins, especially given how little of the deep ocean scientists have actually explored compared to outer space itself. Here's an important trust signal to keep in mind. No confirmed scientific evidence has ever linked any sound detected near the Mariana Trench to anything beyond natural, explainable sources, whether biological, geological, or related to standard ocean equipment and shipping activity. Every mysterious signal, fully investigated so far by researchers, has eventually been traced back to an ordinary, natural explanation, even when that process took considerable time and careful analysis to complete. But here's why these moments of genuine scientific confusion still matter, even without an alien explanation attached. They reveal exactly how much of our own planet remains completely unexplored and undocumented. Scientists possess more complete, detailed maps of the surface of Mars and the Moon than they currently do of our own ocean floor here on Earth. Think about that comparison for a moment. We've mapped the exact surface texture of another planet millions of miles away in more precise detail than large sections of the ocean floor located right here on our own world. Which raises an unavoidable question. If a whale can produce a sound complex enough to briefly confuse trained researchers and reach a signal strange enough to spark genuine alien speculation, What else remains completely undiscovered in a place we've explored so little? Here's a fact that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. Scientists have mapped the surface of Mars in more complete detail than they've mapped the ocean floor of our own planet. Confirmed by researchers working in ocean mapping and planetary science, a significant majority of Earth's ocean floor remains completely unmapped in any kind of high-resolution detail, while spacecraft orbiting Mars have already captured detailed imagery covering nearly the planet's entire surface. Picture that comparison directly. A planet sitting tens of millions of miles away, one humans have never physically visited in person, mapped in more complete detail than the ocean floor of the exact planet every single human being currently lives on. Here's why that gap exists. Mapping Mars mainly requires cameras and radar mounted on orbiting spacecraft, technology capable of scanning enormous areas relatively quickly and efficiently from high above the surface. Mapping the deep ocean floor here on Earth requires completely different, far more difficult technology. Sound waves, specifically sonar, because light and radio signals can't penetrate deep water effectively the way they travel easily through open space. Think of it like trying to map an enormous cave system, using only echoes bouncing off distant walls, compared to simply taking a clear photograph from a comfortable, safe distance above. One method moves fast and covers enormous ground efficiently. The other moves incredibly slow, methodical, and expensive, requiring specialized ships to travel back and forth, collecting data one narrow strip of seafloor at a time. This exact gap explains why discoveries like new volcanic activity, previously undocumented species, and strange underwater signals keep happening near places like the Mariana Trench, even in extremely recent years. We simply haven't finished looking yet. Large sections of our own planet's seafloor remain as mysterious and unexplored today as the surface of another planet millions of miles away. Scientists studying ocean mapping believe fully completing a detailed map of Earth's entire ocean floor could still take many more years of dedicated, continuous effort, even using our absolute best modern technology available today. That single fact reframes the entire story we've been telling about the Mariana Trench so far. This isn't a place that's been fully studied, catalogued, and completely understood already. It's a place we've barely begun exploring in any real depth, which leads directly to the biggest question left standing after everything we've now covered about this trench. What exactly is still hiding down there, waiting to be found? After everything we've explored, glowing predators, pressure-proof fish, boiling underwater chimneys, ancient bacteria trapped in rock, plastic pollution, nuclear traces, whale falls, earthquakes, and volcanoes nobody expected, one simple truth remains standing above all of it. We've barely scratched the surface of the Mariana Trench. Confirmed by ocean scientists studying this exact region, a significant majority of the deep sea remains completely unexplored by direct human observation. Every single expedition sent down into this trench so far has returned with new discoveries, new species, new unexplained signals, new evidence of geological activity nobody had documented before that specific mission. Picture an entire section of our own planet, 7 miles deep, spanning over 1,000 miles in length, where new species and new mysteries keep surfacing every single time researchers manage to look a little closer. Scientists studying deep ocean environments believe there could be entire species living in the Mariana Trench right now that have never once been observed by a single human being. Not rare, not occasional, potentially common, hidden simply because so little of this environment has actually been explored directly with cameras, submersibles, or trained researchers physically present. Here's why that idea feels so powerful. This isn't some distant planet millions of miles away, completely inaccessible with our current technology. This is a location right here on Earth, technically reachable using vessels humans have already successfully built and piloted multiple times throughout history. And yet, most of it remains a genuine, complete mystery. Every new expedition into the Mariana Trench continues to reveal creatures perfectly adapted to crushing pressure, permanent darkness, and near freezing cold, thriving in ways that continue to challenge basic assumptions scientists once held firmly about the fundamental requirements for life itself. And beyond the biology alone, this trench continues actively shaping our entire planet through earthquakes, volcanic activity, and slow tectonic movement happening constantly, silently, completely invisible beneath miles of crushing black water most people will never personally witness. The deepest, most mysterious place on our entire planet isn't hiding somewhere unreachable out among the stars. It's sitting right here, 7 miles beneath the surface of our own ocean, largely unexplored, quietly waiting for the next expedition, brave enough and capable enough to look a little closer and find out exactly what else has been hiding down there all along.